All right. And we are live. Welcome again, everybody, to another exciting news roundup from the Crowdsourced Politics podcast. Today, I am joined by Chase Mitchell.
Hey, everybody. Good to be here.
Art Black.
Howdy, howdy.
And joining us for the first time is Counterpoints.
Yeah. What's up, guys? Happy to be here.
If this is your first time joining the news roundup, we do this every week, typically around 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time on Wednesdays, but that is going to change due to my new work schedule. We cover the weeks of news from Wednesday before to the current Wednesday and give the kind of analysis only the crowd can provide. On tonight's episode, we're going to be covering a variety of topics, including the continued madness of Tucker Carlson and his anti-vaccine crusade. We are going to cover some COVID news. We're going to be going over some of the what did I have? There it is. The National Bail Fund going into the Deep South, Liz Chaney and the future of the GOP, among other topics. But before we get into all these topics, Counterpoints, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself to our audience? Our audience is mostly from Facebook and a little bit of YouTube. So sure that they'll be wanting to get to know you.
Oh yeah, and I'll try to minimize my profanity since we're on a friendly family-friendly platform like Facebook. My name is Connor. I run a YouTube channel named Counterpoints, growing pretty fast. We just broke 6.5K. Or we're about to break 6.5K. I'm a Marine veteran of 4 years. I was in 2006 to 2010, deployed 0708, have some crazy stories, not too crazy stories. I'm also a law enforcement veteran. I spent 4 years in law enforcement, 3 years on the road, 1 year in the schools. And then I'm also like a massive history nerd. So you can catch me. I don't have a Twitch channel, but you can catch me on Twitch debating a whole bunch of leftists all the time. It's what I do for fun. And then also I identify as like center-right politically. So I was raised Christian conservative, but I can't. I'm kind of like a never Trumper. So raised in the right wing, but have some beefs with the right wing. And that's kind of me in a nutshell.
And I think that's very fair. Go ahead, Chase.
Can I ask you a personal question?
You can ask me as many personal questions as you want, bud.
How did you land at this new haircut? Because it is excellent.
I appreciate that. My audience hates it. So
the audience is wrong. I'm sorry. As the person with the best opinion on this panel, your audience is absolutely wrong. This haircut is fantastic. You look awesome.
Yeah. So I'm very lucky that I have a decent head shape. Otherwise, I wouldn't be able to just take a pair of clippers and go, hey, yachts. I'm very fortunate in that. I learned that in the Marine Corps that I could shave my head without looking like a weirdo. So, we just did that. And now we're growing it back. So I'll be a hippie in another 60 days. So, yeah.
I could never do it. My head is big and weirdly shaped. It would be awful.
Yeah. What's fun is when you actually like learn what your head shape is in boot camp, because like there were some guys who were not expecting it and they're shaped like a glass jar, you know what I'm saying? So it's like
yeah, I've got that long like King of the Crystal Skull thing going on.
Yeah. And I was about to say, Art, you have an excellent head shape. I like
practically xenomorph, right?
Yeah. So no, I appreciate that because my audience has the exact opposite opinion right now.
When I first saw you,
they'll learn.
Yeah. You know what they should learn? They should learn that like they shouldn't put so much emphasis into my looks, and they should like, deal with what I'm saying more. Like what is this like? Like, am I your comfort blanket? Is my aesthetic like what gets you through the day? It's like the one source of stability in your life. Because if it is, that's like, guys, you need to refocus your priorities.
You're probably one of the least cringy conservatives on Twitch. Now when you have the haircut, it kind of breaks that aesthetic a little bit now, doesn't it?
Yeah. It is a lot of weight, basically coming into those things and actually having something to actually fight over instead of not listening to what lefties are saying and then just regurgitating talking points. That is hard. So
good times.
Yeah, God damn it. Sorry, Facebook.
No, our community doesn't really give a shit. We curse all the time.
My grandma's on Facebook, I'll have you know. And
I don't. Okay, in my defense, I cussed like a sailor before I joined the Marine Corps, but the Marine Corps is in the Department of the Navy, so like that's my excuse. That's how that works.
Yeah, the men's department.
Yeah, exactly.
That's an old inter service joke.
Yeah. Nice.
Connor, I wanted to ask you a thing. So I haven't heard you say anything about this or anything like that, but what is one of the things that most got you interested into politics?
I mean, I've been into it as long as I can remember. Both my grandparents are World War II veterans, and also I lived in Belgium for 3 years when I was very young. So I was just surrounded with history. So basically, my entire childhood was like, your family went to Europe to fight a horrific war that killed millions of people, and we're trying to never repeat a conflict of this scale again. And you live in this like privileged world that was fought for and created by your grandparents. That was kind of like the subconscious or conscious narrative. So basically, like, you can't look at something that intense and real and crazy historically and not say like, wow, how do we like never do that again? And also, what was it like for that to occur? And also to be like a young person during those times. And so that's where I started studying politics, because it seemed like you either understand these things or you're just the victim of them, and there's no real in between. So that was kind of my interest in history and my interest in politics right there.
Okay.
Yeah.
I think that's I can relate to that to a degree. My grandfather was on my mom's side was a World War II doctor, so I can relate to that to a degree.
Yeah.
So, what topics do you guys want to cover first? Let's try not to end it on a terrible note tonight, like we've been doing for the last couple of weeks. So, do you want to?
Somehow we always manage to find a bummer right at the end.
I was about to say, we're talking about the news. Isn't that just like naturally a bummer? Like, what do we? Like?
I mean, there's been some.
Actually, there's a lot of uplifting stuff lately. I feel like, but maybe I'm wrong.
All right. For instance, the desk of Donald J. Trump was just banned. So there's a Twitter account that Trump created today in an attempt to get past his Twitter ban by, I guess, giving his desk some kind of anthropomorphic role in, expressing the word of Trump to the masses. So, but this is an interesting discussion that's going on, because traditionally we had the kind of, let's say the originalist conservative view that the corporations are essentially, private entities that can do whatever they want, and within the scope of the law, and it's basically your house, your rules. There's a kind of an interesting shift that's going on right now, in that because these corporations have not only gotten large, but have also, just for a number of business or social reasons, decided to enforce rules that are not favorable to conservatives. Now suddenly there's this concept that Facebook is kind of like a digital commons, and that it's a almost the socialist view of what corporations should provide for society for free. It's a really interesting kind of a shift. And then, conversely, one could say that, on the left, you're also seeing a bit of a role reversal, where people are saying, oh, well, it's a big corporation, it can do whatever it wants. So it's an interesting, just a development in that people are looking at social media. Even like Ron DeSantis in Florida basically just passed a bill to limit social media's ability to restrict people based off of content, which is not going to last very long in court. But this is kind of where we are, where ideologically, a lot of the big parties are kind of, or movements are kind of adrift right now, and it's really just a scramble for power.
I had not heard about this at all. I literally didn't even know that this was a news story. But doesn't Destiny do the exact same thing, like with the omni-liberal account or whatever? How does he get away with it?
Because that's not Destiny. That's Destiny's friend. Okay, so.
Okay, but this wasn't Donald Trump. It was a desk.
Yeah, it was Donald Trump's.
Right. Yeah.
Oh man, no, I think it's just a reporting issue. So for instance, I think Twitter probably cares way more what Donald Trump does than what Destiny's friend does. So I think that's probably why you saw it get taken down on one and not the other. So.
Yeah, I would say it's probably a reporting thing as well. Also, it might not be as obvious to bots as having the desk of Donald Trump in your name and then treating like Trump. Whereas with the omni-liberal, it's like, well, that could be anybody to a bot, right? So
Yeah, and that's where like I would caution Destiny's friend to kind of chill, because he's been like on an anti-leftist like rampage recently, and I'm like, you're gonna get flagged and shut down eventually. like you can have your edgy takes, but like it just seems he wants to go nuclear right now, and it's like, like good luck with that. I expect to see your page down in the next like month, because you can't keep going to war that aggressively and not expect people to go after you. So
sure,
is what it is.
Especially with Marks and ML Twitter, like those people.
Oh yeah,
Jesus Christ,
vindictive as a motherfucker. Oh yeah, sorry.
It's all good. You don't like cursing's not going to get us. If it gets us taken down from Facebook, I don't give a shit. So it's all good.
Nah, it's okay. I'm just trying to be. It's partially COVID brain. It's also just the way that I talk, but it's all right.
I honestly don't think that Facebook is very good at taking much of anything down except Donald Trump, which they just reaffirmed. They just reaffirmed as well that their Supreme Court, the Facebook Supreme Court, which God, using that name just kind of diminishes the actual Supreme Court.
Oh God, is that what they actually call it? I thought
that's
were
what they call it.
Oh, that's what they call it. Yeah,
that's a branding issue.
It's pretty awful. So they formed this Supreme Court to kind of like abdicate their moderation responsibilities. They have this panel that basically confirms or denies when they make moderation decisions that kind of come under public scrutiny, and they affirmed their ban of Donald Trump. So Donald Trump is permanently banned. Kind of? Am I mistaken? I thought it was.
No, you're like 90% right. So what happened was like they said you can't indefinitely ban him. You have to shit or get off the pot. So either ban him permanently or reinstate him. You can't do this indefinite thing because they don't want to have it punted at these wow, that's a little weird filter. these super political charged things be punted to them and to avoid flack. So they get the flack themselves, if that makes any sense. I don't know. It's kind of rambling there for a second. So.
Yeah, I'm really curious how this is going to affect figures like Tucker Carlson, because he seems very interested in continuing the MAGA rhetoric single-handedly. So I'm just kind of worried, like, at what is the Overton window now? What's acceptable? What's not? What's going to get you kicked off and what's not? And that's kind of like a difficult question, because oftentimes these people, they're not explicitly committing crimes. And the only thing that Donald Trump has been accused of so far that could be deemed, I mean, he's been accused of a lot of things, let's be real. But the main thing that was kind of like the straw that crossed the camel's back, I think broke the camel's back, was the January 6th riots and his role in that. So like where's the line? Where's the Overton window? What's, conservatism versus this new MAGA thing? It's brutal out there right now.
We have the same issue as Facebook admins trying to determine where exactly the line is. Unfortunately, a lot of it's just really subjective sometimes. I mean, you can conceptually paint with these big, broad brushes, but sometimes you look at certain rulings compared to other rulings, and individually they all kind of make sense. But then when you stack them all together, you're like, well, this is kind of indicating some kind of bias. And you're not trying to be biased, but everyone has their own innate biases. And even when you try to be fair in a given lane, sometimes people can actually make a pretty reasonable case that there is, some degree of unfairness, or sometimes you just have one group that's just more inclined to break the rules and be wrong. So, unfortunately, there's no easy answer to it, and it's very easy for people to feel slighted or, marginalized.
No, that's very true. Go ahead.
Yeah. No, I was just thinking, because like, so for instance, like I try to conceptualize this, because oftentimes the opinions that we're talking about right now, by today's standards, like, are kind of extreme. But if we were to kick this back to like the 1940s or 50s, it would actually be fairly common. So for instance, like if you were to say, oh, well, the United States isn't a religious nation, but we were founded as Christian and we should stay majority Christian, and it doesn't matter if our religion is imposed in the laws, that's acceptable. Basically, what is our levels of immigration? There are very clear like racial groups and racial distinctions or whatever, and my group is the best group. That would also be common even in America in the 40s and 50s. And then I'm trying to think of what else, but like there's when it comes to like immigration or something like that, how that gets tied to race, and then how that gets tied to ethnicity, national origin, political representation, all that kind of stuff. A lot of this stuff would be very literally paleo conservative, literally like old school Christian nationalist conservatives. And that's kind of the thing is like, if you read a character like Pat Buchanan, he went to war over these ideas in like this, I want to say the 50s, 60s, and 70s. And he largely lost. So you're not seeing anything new in America. You're actually seeing the revival of a political ideology that's maybe like 70 years old. And I think it was just quieter than the Reaganite free market conservatism of like the 80s and 90s. So it's a weird place to be historically.
And, conversely, on the left, there's opinions that are more or less mainstream now that even, 20 years ago would have been a little bit rare and would be absolutely unheard of. How can you call FDR liberal? He wasn't even for trans rights. Like, there's, if you watch back far enough,
True.
Everyone's a paleo conservative if you go, just step back in time. So,
right.
Our local attitudes or in this, day and era have just shifted very dramatically. And sometimes I think people lose sight of that. And this is my issue as someone, further on the left, is that a lot of times people on the left don't appreciate how rapidly things are improving and changing, because certainly you see this ideal state that we should be at and say, well, why aren't we there? Ideally, yeah, but unfortunately, some people just don't change that fast, and it's in some ways unrealistic to expect that they will. And all you can do is kind of do what you can and make the progress you can, within the the bounds of reality.
Well, how liberal of you to say, aren't you? Are you not a communist revolutionary ready to take it to the bourgeois and the capitalist overlords? Like,
if we had the gulags, it'd be different. But I'm just saying, at the moment, we're a little constrained in resources, so we have to make do.
Yeah, that's like the brutal thing for me, like dealing with I probably spend too much time on Twitter. That's probably one of my main crimes. But dealing with people like that, it's like, guys, like some of the horrific ideas that you're advocating for, we've done them in the past. Like we have done these things before. So like maybe low and slow, maybe incremental, maybe distribution of power, maybe power brokerage negotiation, bipartisan negotiations, like all these kinds of things. Work with what you got. And I would look at, from like a historical analysis perspective, I would look at, if you looked at like left-wing dictatorships and some of the authoritarian nonsense that happened in those, I would see that as one group of people looking at a temperamentally different group of people and saying they're unnecessary to society. And then basically like purging them politically and kicking them out of all the social infrastructure. And then if you looked at like right-wing dictatorships, fascist dictatorships or whatever, they said this temperamental group, this political group is unnecessary for the healthy functioning of a society. So we're just going to repress them and then we're going to rule. But it all kind of like seesaws back to the middle eventually, often to the tune of tens of millions of people dead. So how about we stop seesawing so hard? How about we figure out how to live together?
Yeah, and I think that with a lot of the left-wing movements of the 20th century, you really had either anti-colonial, anti-monarchy forces that really weren't necessarily like what Marx would envision as like a society ready to transition from capitalism to socialism to communism. These were more basically independence movements that were seeking some kind of intellectual basis, and they were able to use certain tenets of that to kind of create these rallying points. But ultimately, that wasn't anything that was left wing. I mean, everyone hates the whole like real communism's never been tried. Everyone likes to laugh at it, but it's true. Like the 20th century was really just it was an old world that was based on colonialism and an empire that was just dissolving, and a lot of the prime movers against that happened to rally under an intellectual movement that really they just kind of took some nice talking points from it and then turned into these wacko dictatorships. Okay, well, were they leftists though? That's an important question. Oh, I mean, certainly in that context, yeah. I mean, but this is not in a way that when you're talking about leftists, when you have for instance, like the Russian, you have this monarchy you're trying to overthrow, and you have this very primitive, basic backward society that you're trying to move up quickly. That's not what Marx was talking about when he was saying, hey, you guys be communist. Like this, he was envisioning a much slower progress where society would rise up into this bourgeois society. Eventually you would, shed some of these trappings and you kind of work your way up. There's no way you could take something like China and like immediately just jump to the head of the line. That was bound to turn into a wacko dictatorship. There's just no way around that. Right. Yeah, and this is where I think a lot of righties are
they're surprised when I'm as charitable as I am with like socialists or communists. So oftentimes lefties have conversations about the material conditions. So I'm hostile to socialism and communism because I don't think the material conditions are ripe for them. I don't think that we have enough basically not the opposite of scarcity, whatever, abundance. I don't think we have enough abundance in order to create a socialist or communist society. I'm also worried about the kind of people that's going to create, basically how you interact with your environment and the way the environment interacts with you. Basically, the movie WALL-E, where everybody is like fat and they sit in chairs and, you know, they just like sip like 54-ounce big gulps every day. I'm not interested in that world. Yeah, like I want to, or Idiocracy, where the guy is literally strapped to the masturbation chair. So yeah, like I don't want that. I want to avoid those.
This is how we get kicked off Facebook.
Oh, I'm sorry. Wait. So the first were bad, but the chair was bad. Oh man,
acknowledging the existence of masturbation is against Facebook too.
My bad. So no, but just the point being that like I think there's a lot of dystopias that you can create from lefty ideas, and then basically the way to like, but there is a material condition set that could work, and that material condition set is like post fusion or whatever power source gives us basically cheaper unlimited power. Space mining, basically the ability to get the rare minerals that might be scarce on the planet Earth that help us like jump automation forward. Automation, having AI that is capable of doing almost everything that human beings are capable of doing, and then like turning that into a way to free up human labor to do whatever it wants with its time. That is a set of material conditions that might be available 500 to 1,000 years from now, in which I think actual socialism or actual communism is possible. I just don't see it right now.
Can I ask you? I have a follow-up. I have a follow-up on that because I think you're right on. I think you're right on energy and like materials not being infinite, effectively infinite, or a non-scarce in our lifetime, certainly. But I think that there's a non-zero chance that in the next 100 years that labor scarcity kind of goes away because of the advent of so much automation, so much artificial intelligence. There are so many jobs. I mean, 11% of American jobs right now are in transportation. Those jobs will not exist in 20 years. They won't. Like that is guaranteed. So like, how do we like the only, I'm kind of with you a little bit, like the only context in which I'm like a true leftist is like a post-scarcity future. But I'm worried, and I think that we should start kind of preparing for a reality in which labor is no longer scarce.
So I'm going to use just a quick example of just my time as a contractor in Iraq and Afghanistan after I was out of the military. And one of the things you'd notice is when you have units rotate through, you basically have this like arc of competence where if they're there for, let's say, 9 months, they'll start off slow. They'll build up this huge amount of competence at the end, and then they'll transition out. And you'll have this replacement, which is low on competence, have to be built up. So we were there to help basically, train and assist and orient people, to their, we were technicians. We had a technical task. But the locals, the insurgents, would stay the same. You'd have this baseline where they would actually get a little bit better every year because they weren't going anywhere. They didn't really lose any ground as far as like their institutional knowledge because their institution didn't go anywhere. So AI is kind of like that in that, like right now, AI doesn't drive a car as well as a human, but it also never gets worse. So every time a car gets better at driving itself based off of AI, it gets to a point where it will never lose that ground. It will never get worse than where it was before. Whereas for a human driver, at some point, someone gets old and retires, they die, you get a new driver on the road, they need to get better. That AI, and this is true for medicine, this is true for everything. Every time AI gains ground, it never loses it. Whereas for a human, we're in this constant cycle of replacement. And at some point, when AI gets above us, we will never catch up. And that's just going to happen across the board.
That entire like line of thinking makes me want to smoke a joint and then like listen to Joe Rogan talk about like AI being the butterfly that emerges from the chrysalis of humanity, and it's not actually us who's going to conquer the stars. It's going to be like our robot super children that are going to conquer the stars, and Well, so Art, here's a question: were you installing electronic countermeasures in Al Assad Air Base in 2007, 2008?
Wait, I was in. No. Okay. But I mean, it's probably a shaved head that looks familiar.
Okay. No. I'm just checking because literally, so basically, there was a whole host of like technical consultants that were rolling out the MRAPs, the mine resistant ambush protected vehicles in 07, 08, and part of my job at that time was to roll those vehicles out and also to inventory all the countermeasures. So I know, and I know exactly what you're talking about too, because basically, like we showed up, the records were all dicked up. I worked in supply and logistics. So I basically spent 7 months unjacking the records. And then we turn over to a new unit and they're like all individual augments. So they're literally people who have been civilians for like 4 years. And we turn over our books to them. And like the first day they like created like 3,000 new errors. And I was like, no, my life's work.
Right. Yeah.
To bring in some,
I was like, I can't fix this. I'm out. I'll see you.
Right.
Good luck.
to bring in some comments from our community, we have Jared Marshall from Facebook saying it would require 4.5 Earth's worth of resources for all humans in existence to live a first world lifestyle to go into this post-scarcity world talk. And then from Death of Certainty on Twitch said pretty radical anti-censorship, and whilst Trump is a dummy, letting corporations that serve a public good just remove speech they dislike worries him. So let's bring it back a little bit onto the topic that spurred off this entire conversation. What are your guys' thoughts
how did
about
we get here? Oh my god.
It's just that's the way. Yep. Hey, you said it.
I love beach ball theory. It's like, and then the crowd punches it and it flies in a different direction. That's how I have conversations.
It was great though. So I'm not complaining there at all. Yeah. But what do you guys think of Facebook's? We talked about Facebook's Supreme Court and the desk of Donald Trump being removed from Twitter, and then of course there's this whole on the right wing they're all saying, hey, if the companies don't stop being culturally woke, then we won't take their money and do their bidding anymore. Bullshit.
Well, all right. So do you have a right to demand the New York Times print your letter to the editor? No. Then you don't have a right to post.
You have a right to demand it, yeah.
You have the right. I mean, right. That's all I'm saying.
I demand the New York Times publish it.
Well played. Well played. I withdraw my statement. But you see where I'm going with that. Is that you don't have a right for a private entity to host your speech. You have a right to say it. You can host it yourself. But if you want to go down that road of saying that every entity out there must host my speech, that's going to lead to some wacky shit. So, I mean,
So this is my, even as like right wing or whatever, and by right wing I literally mean in the French sense, like the left wing people were for the people. That was where they oriented power. Right wing is institutions. That's where I orient power. So even as a right wing person, where often conservatives are viewed as the people who are being censored, the people who are being pushed outside the Overton window, what I find discomforting, because I don't know how to deal with it, is if we created a world in which all speech, regardless of public, like they had to be published. Basically, you're sticking your gun to the head of the metaphorical New York Times that is Facebook, and you're saying you will publish all this stuff as long as it's not explicitly a crime. There are people, and I'll just name drop Nick Fuentes, who is a brilliant rhetorician. Like he really is. He understands optics. He understands how to explain rhetoric. He understands how to play to people's bases. He can create narratives. I don't think he's an unintelligent human being, but his narrative, the meta narrative that he wants to spread, is nefarious. And that meta narrative is basically white people, Europeans, Americans of European descent, have immigrated to this country. They've been manipulated by social media and by birth control and by globalists, which usually means Jews, to not have kids and to import brown and black people into the country in order to demographically replace them. That's literally the whole story. And this is specifically for him, it's rooted in a religious context. So it would be viewed as the Christian nationalists of the 30s and 40s in a historical context. But they'll play historical rhetoric games all the time on moving the ball on what they mean. Like, do they mean Jew? Do they mean globalist? Do they mean elites? Do they mean this? Do they mean that? And meanwhile, you have this entire subculture of at least 100,000 people who are basically like, they are a shove away from neo-Nazism. Like, it's literally like, it's like maybe... Well, I mean, I would say he's a Christian nationalist, but again, it's like this historical distinction that is like, it's so close that it almost doesn't even matter. Right. And they'll play in the ambiguity. Right. Yeah. So, but that's what I'm saying is you basically have at least 100,000 people who have been recruited into this movement and believe it wholeheartedly, and that's terrifying. That we basically have that going on in the United States in the 21st century. Is like how did we get back there? You know,
this is like the tragedy of the Donald Trump conversation that I think nobody is talking about. And Nick, you talking about Nick Fuentes kind of reminds me of this. Facebook and all these other platforms have banned Donald Trump. They really have not done anything. Well, they've done some things, but in large part, the communities that allow people to fester and regurgitate these kinds of, in my opinion, dangerous and like inhumane and horrible ideas are still allowed to flourish on most of these platforms. So there is a straight up like anti-vax conspiracy subreddit that I subscribe to just to see like what would happen to it. And it's still going. And it is just 24 hours a day nonsense, thousands and thousands of people all the time. Nick Fuentes people are still definitely able to find each other on Facebook. Facebook is not really going after those things because people aren't going to know. Facebook hasn't really addressed its moderation problem in terms of deplatforming the bad ideas. They just go after the big ones so that they aren't culpable for those things in the public eye. But the root problem is still there. And in fact, I think it's getting worse.
Yeah, so I would kind of like to articulate the fear from the right, because I do consider myself lib-right basically, and I think that from a left-wing perspective, I would probably have an extreme perspective on firearms specifically. So I think that basically like there shouldn't be an assault weapons ban. I have some problems with like universal background checks. There's a way that I would like to do it that doesn't involve basically the tracking of serial numbers. There's a whole host of things that I believe about the Second Amendment that are like near religious convictions on my part, and they would be viewed as extreme. And so the problem is, well, extreme in some circles, probably in techie New York or San Francisco circles, they'd be viewed as extreme. In Central Florida, I could literally talk to the guy at the gas station about this. So basically, like that's kind of the fear. Is that so? Okay, so we banned Nick Fuentes because the Groyper stuff it's at least Christian nationalism, if not neo-fascism. Okay, all right, so that's out. The vaccine stuff, I understand the danger of it, but are we saying that the government or tech? So are we saying that tech companies have the right to ban potentially harmful information that might help people or hurt people from a public health perspective? Or are we saying that the government has the right to compel you to do a vaccination? Because that's really, I haven't watched Tucker Carlson enough, but I'm pretty sure Tucker Carlson is vaccinated.
Yes.
So I'm wondering if his argument is like, the problem is that they're not telling you what's going on, or is the problem like the act of compulsion? Because for me, oftentimes the conservative, the Burkean conservative, where you're trying to slow down liberals and progressives, oftentimes liberals and progressives want to do the right thing the wrong way, and then conservatives want to do the wrong thing for the right reasons. And it's a fucking mess. So yeah, I'll leave that there.
Before we get into the whole Tucker Carlson situation, with
thanks. I needed some backup. I needed somebody else to say some profanity, so I didn't feel alone.
With his anti-vax thing, I want to talk about something Death of Certainty stated, which is this idea that Facebook is considered a public utility, should be considered a public utility. He basically states, I wanted to say wouldn't say every entity, so all publishers should have to publish everything. However, certain social media outlets have become in a very real way a major method of communications. New York Times has a limited space, Twitter does not. So there's this idea among some leftists, a lot of conservatives right now, that Twitter, Facebook, Reddit, Instagram, etc., should be treated as public utilities, as being the commons area for where people hold speech. And since that is such a big, since it's such a it's a limited storefront, but such a big audience, that if you get banned from any one of these platforms, you're essentially getting banned from speaking at all, is what their idea is. So should these companies be treated as public utilities and have being treated as such, have to follow more stringent First Amendment rights, or should they be kind of treated as they are now, basically left to their own devices within reason?
Well, and I would just frame this in terms of what was the reality for the last 200 years. Well, if you owned a newspaper, you had a lot of freedom of speech. And if you didn't, then you were welcome to say things in your house or on the street corner, or maybe write a letter to friends or whatever. But there was not this like, oh, applause? Really?
No, I'm giving you claps.
Okay, all right. No, but that's all I'm saying is that like nothing's actually fundamentally changed other than, we now have a bit more abundance of communication. You could say, well, this is the way people communicate now, so things have changed. Well, sort of. So. I mean, but really, you still just have a couple of giant corporations, or like you don't have Wheeling Randolph Hearst with a couple of newspapers. Instead, you have a couple of tech tycoons. But fundamentally, this is the same America as it always was, with just a bit of new technology as far as what printing press we're running.
And personally, I view the internet as should be considered a public utility. So maybe a person shouldn't be a person shouldn't necessarily be banned from being able to run a website. I feel that as them spending off their own papers, their own pamphlets and stuff. That's where it gets tricky for me between my ideas of what should and shouldn't be considered permissible, and broadly speaking, left people's permissibility, because I think some would actually be in favor of what happened to Parler. Essentially, Parler was, everybody knows Parler was taken down due to all the hate speech and planning of insurrection that happened on there, and it essentially got blacklisted from the entire internet. Not sure if that should happen. I don't know how you regulate that, but it's one of those situations that's tricky for me. So
yeah, I'm with you. It's just complicated. Like, I feel really uncomfortable with like a handful of billionaires being able to decide what is or isn't on the internet. And especially when it comes down to companies like Level 3 Communications, who run all these backbones, and you don't even know who their CEO is, like, and they're making decisions about what it can or cannot be in the internet. Like that really doesn't taste very good. It's kind of scary. I don't think anybody likes that. But at the same time, how do you, what do you regulate there? Like, what do we want government to step in and do? It's not, I've been really conflicted about it for a while. I think the number one thing that I always go back to is we have to have effective antitrust measures, and we don't. And I'm really, really, really glad that many lawmakers, both Republican and Democrat, are actually starting to take antitrust seriously again. The standard that we have right now, which is antitrust can only be applied when it causes an increase in cost, is obviously outdated and like no longer effective at all. And I'm excited. I'm really, really hopeful that we actually get some like real competition in the digital marketplace, and that we aren't just, literally it's going to be soon where I have effectively 3 choices of where to buy my groceries, and they're Amazon, Amazon, and Amazon. So like, that's not cool. I don't really like that. So that's my hope.
Yeah, I think we have to kind of run the thought experiment, because I think the concern is real. So whoever said that is nice. I think whoever said that was making a valid objection. But at the same time, like, so we have to run this out logically, which is basically what we're saying is like, okay, so let's treat it as the commons. Anybody can say whatever they want. They can accumulate whatever audience they want. It doesn't matter how big they are, as long as they're not advocating specifically for crimes, and we will allow that. If we're applying this standard and we're applying it uniformly, that basically means that we would allow neo-Nazis, we would allow Christian nationalists, we would allow basically Islamists or jihadist recruiters. We would allow who else would it be, like polygamists, Mormons to recruit. And as long as they didn't explicitly say you have to commit crimes in the name of my ideology, as long as they said, oh well, the caliphate should be achieved in this lifetime, and also honkies are bad and they're destroying everything, and we need to destroy Western civilization and all this kind of stuff. But by the way, do it in a peaceful way. Okay, like commit jihad in a peaceful way. Okay, and then same thing with like neo-Nazism. It's like, oh, the Jews are pulling the strings and the world is falling apart and they're trying to destroy your race. And basically, if you don't do something right now, white people will go extinct. But be a Nazi in a peaceful way. Okay, I don't want to violate terms of service
in Minecraft.
In Minecraft. Like, is this the world? Is this the public square that we want? Is this the forum that we want? And that's where I'm at, where it's like, I understand what you're saying. I understand the principle. What's the practical reality that we're talking about? So.
Yeah, and that's where the rubber meets the road, right? That's where nobody on this panel really has a sure idea of how to go about this while maintaining what is considered a fundamental right in the United States, which is free speech.
Well, and if I may be so liberal, maybe the economic incentives of these companies to do what is in their fiduciary interest is ultimately what is going to drive the best decision making in this regard.
Hey, now just keep that neoliberalism over there, you.
Well, I mean, probably hosting terrorists is probably bad for ad revenue. So
Sure.
yeah, I would hope so. Anyways,
I'd hate to see the numbers on that.
Yeah, that's probably true.
Oh God, that's a terrifying thought.
Right.
In the short term, it's probably good for ad revenue. In the medium term, it's probably really bad.
Yeah.
Once enough people figure out that that's what's going on, then the boycotts start, and then that's when the sharehours get shifted.
Okay. So this is reminding me of It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia episode where Frank gets Al Shabaab to like endorse Wolf Cola as their official drink of like jihadist terrorism or whatever.
Love it.
That's so the controversy temporarily drives sales. Like, oh
nice.
God.
Yeah.
Brutal.
Were you going to break in with a point before we move on to the next topic?
I'm a couple points ago.
Yeah,
I'm good.
All right.
I'm sure we covered it.
So we covered First Amendment speech issues with Trump and a whole host of other things packed in there. Let's talk about Tucker Carlson's new anti-vax mantra and how that's going. Does anybody want to give a quick recap of that? Did they see it, or should I just go ahead and do it?
Yeah, somebody else, please.
You should go ahead.
Lay it on us.
Okay, so to make a long story short, Tucker Carlson is now going on an anti-vax crusade and also telling people not to wear a mask anymore. The several things that he said comes right out of the anti-vax campaign book, where these vaccines might affect your fertility issues. So it might make you sterile, men and women, by the way. They also might, young people don't need to take the vaccine because we're strong and we can fight it because we're godly men or some other bullshit. And yeah, that's the long story short of that. In other Tucker Carlson news, though, he and Joe Reed have been getting into it for the last Joe Reed, I think, responded once, so I don't really consider that necessarily back and forth. But of course, he's going on this whole anti-CRT, critical race theory tirade that he's been going, this arc that's been going on since Trump lost. So let's cover some of that stuff. What are you guys' thoughts?
So I just want to be clear about some specific things that Tucker Carlson said, which include if you see a child with a mask, you should call Child Protective Services or yell at them because they're being abused. If you see a child with a mask outside, if you are a teenager, you absolutely shouldn't get vaccinated because you're not at risk of dying from COVID. The reproductive thing, I believe what he specifically said is it hasn't been studied and we don't know if there's going to be any effect on reproductive health. All of these things, in my opinion, are just kind of straight up misinformation, and he's not presenting them in a way to be like, and he's also kind of implying over and over again that the government is mandating vaccines, which to my knowledge isn't happening. There are, I think, some schools that are requiring people to be vaccinated before they go back there. But he's saying all of these things, and just none of it is true. Like, there are numerous people who got pregnant while on COVID vaccine trials. There was some women, and he cited a doctor who said that she had a change in her menstrual cycle and then failed to finish what she said, which was then it returned to normal in the next month. And that's what's been shown from women over and over again. So he's like cherry picking information to try to, I don't even know what he's trying to do. I don't really understand, drive up viewership by capturing the anti-vax market. I don't really know what's going on. It's very strange to me.
Yes. I have family that watch Fox News, and they basically are in this mindset of, well, I'm not anti-vax, but I'm not getting this vaccine.
Which one?
The COVID vaccine. Any
oh, okay.
Yeah.
Well, okay. So I'll bring up the logical part of it, and then I'll just launch into why I think it's stupid. So the logical part of it is that I want to say that the vaccine, it's been developed in record time, billions of dollars, a few years. I think they were saying that they actually used a part of the previous, like either swine flu or something like that. Like a lot of the research, a lot of the groundwork had already been done for a vaccine that they were researching for like the 2016 epidemic, maybe like H1N1 or something like that.
It was SARS. It was the SARS and MERS.
Right. Yeah. So
just so we're clear, you're talking specifically about the mRNA Pfizer BioNTech vaccine. Right.
Yes. So like that fear or whatever, it's like, oh, they only developed it in like a year. We don't even know what's in it. Like I get that concern. I had it as well. And even me, who just got my second shot today, I basically waited for the first rounds to go out to be like, all right, let's see if people start like, sprouting extra limbs and shit. Like let's see how this
plays. That would
plays.
be awesome.
Yeah. think of the productivity you could have with an extra limb. But like
you thought 2 monitors was good.
Yeah. So no, but basically what came back was that the COVID side effects are almost negligible. They're negligible, especially compared to what COVID can do to you. I talked to two kinds of people whenever I talk to people who have been infected with COVID. I talked to people who basically didn't even know they were infected, and then I talked to people who were on the verge of death. And those are the only two people that I talked to. So considering you don't know which one you are, I think that what is it, like a 1 in a million or 1 in 10,000 chance of like blood clots with like one specific vaccine?
And besides 6 in 6.8 million if you are a young to middle-aged woman.
Right.
Or one of the vaccines. That was only the Johnson & Johnson vaccine.
Yeah, and the other thing that I don't hear talked about in conservative circles either is like, death is not the only bad thing that can happen to you.
True.
So I think there's actually at least some anecdotal reports of people who have they were in COVID for a long time. Some of them were on respirators for a long time. Now they have major because of the inflammatory response that basically taxed the shit out of their body. They now have breathing problems, heart problems, kidney problems. Basically a whole host of other issues. And now because they were either casual or unlucky with their infection, now they have to deal with lifelong health consequences that might have legitimately shortened their lifespan. They might have shortened their lifespan by 10, 20 years just by either being unlucky or being careless. And that's terrifying.
Yeah. Long COVID is a thing, people. Something around 10% or so of people that have to be admitted to the hospital at all, regardless of the severity of it, gets that. But go ahead, Chase.
I'm very lucky to not have any very close friends and family that have died as a result of COVID, but second level connections, several people, parents, grandparents, friends, classmates, not of mine, but of people that I know, which is, really, really tragic. And then you look at, so I understand the kind of automatic gut reaction about the mRNA vaccine, but even like the statement that, it was developed very quickly isn't really true, because the they have been working on this exact type of mRNA vaccine in preparation for this type of event for basically a decade. Yep. And nobody that is spouting the kind of things that Tucker Carlson is spouting is acknowledging that reality. And nobody's acknowledging that hundreds of millions, maybe even billions at this point, of people have been vaccinated, and the death rate is non-existent. It basically doesn't happen. You had one person with the Johnson & Johnson vaccine. I mean, it's astonishing how good these vaccines are. And to not acknowledge that reality and to say, hypothetically, it might, in theory, cause problems with reproduction, even though I have no evidence to back that up. Plenty of people have gotten pregnant during vaccine trials. It's irresponsible.
I'm just asking questions, man.
Yeah, I'm just asking questions, bro.
He's literally the single biggest news show in the United States of America. Like, it is irresponsible.
That's the more terrifying part of it, is that like he's basically regurgitating Groyper talking points, and he's the biggest news show in America. That's
facts.
The scarier part.
So if you think about like World War II, you had the civilian population that had like scrap iron drives, or we would have certain types of rationing, and a lot of that, aside from the utility of it, created a sense of camaraderie and shared purpose. And you had this sense that you had troops that were serving overseas, but you also were able to kind of do your part at home, by way of a kind of communal endeavor. This is kind of the inverse of that. It's like this joint effort to refuse any kind of sacrifice, to not be inconvenienced, but to do it together. So we're not going to wear masks. We're not going to get vaccinated. We're really not going to do anything at all to contribute to the well-being of the country, but as a group. And I think that Tucker is just kind of tapping into the sentiment, which is very deeply widespread. You have a lot of people that simply don't at any level.
You literally hit the nail on the head. I've never heard anyone describe this more effectively.
Listen, don't tell me to get the vaccine. You're not my dad, okay?
Right. But taking that sentiment and weaponizing it. That's it. That's all. We're just taking that and just mass producing it. So I think that's the why Tucker is tapping into it, is because there's a market there that wants to be tapped into. That people want to come together and not do anything.
This is incredibly important because I think psychologically, there's this guy you should definitely have on. His name's Drew Welty. He's an aspiring psychotherapist or something like that, but he's a conservative, and he basically brings up like the tribalism of human beings and how they you can basically we're so tribal that literally just off of like coin flips. I'll describe the study badly. You can literally have a heads and tails group that's split 50-50, and you can basically have like you go home with $19 and the other group goes home with 17, or you can go home with $12 and the other group goes home with 3. And like everybody votes for the one where you go home with less money, but the other team has less money, just like instinctively. So when it comes to tribalism, one of the challenges of like a cosmopolitan, anti-nationalist, anti-border world is that there's no enemy. There's no external threat. There's nothing to rally everybody against. So what happens is we divide ourselves up into, either sports teams or regional affiliations or cities or political parties. And then that's what we use as our tribal mechanism to get out this like interhuman monkey brain angst to smash other people. I am happy that like liberals and progressives have tried to evolve past it. I'm not ready. I love my tribalism monkey brain. And so I don't want to unify humanity while eliminating the tribalism part. I want like nefarious aliens to come on down with the UFOs, and then we can unite as a planet to fight the aliens. That's what I'm counting
totally
on.
Why can't we
at this point that if aliens came, we would all just die because there's no way we'd unite.
Well, what would happen?
I'm actually of the
same...
opposite. I think it's necessary for the next evolution of humanity.
what would happen is that the aliens, any alien species that can intergalactically travel, will be smart enough to pit us against each other and offer boons and benefits to the side that goes to them. So that's what they would do, right?
Yeah.
Now, damn, I lost my train of thought. So never mind. I was going to say something. Oh, no. I got it now. So why can't we just do what Europe did and make soccer our national war pastime? I mean, isn't that what we all just really want, is one giant sports team to root for? Mm-hmm. Go Knicks.
Yeah.
So, I mean, rather than conquer us, because what would be the point? I really hope that any alien that makes it this far, like, I hope that these UFOs that we have out there, just cameras, and all that they're doing is just parked in orbit. They're just like filming us and just beaming it back and just laughing.
It's like, wait 50 years, they'll all kill each other, and then we'll just show up on the deserted planet. So yeah.
No, it's just on this week's episode of Earth.
Yeah,
they're probably placing bets on what we're going to do next. I mean, they can milk this forever.
Oh my God! Can you imagine the gambling scene?
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. There's a classic episode where they're like, "We took a whole bunch of different species and we put them all on the same planet."
Wow,
it's like season 8 or some shit. But yeah. But Chase, go ahead.
Oh, I have no idea what I was going to say, but speaking of South Park, the Casa Bonita, which was also featured in an episode of South Park, is hitting hard financial times, and I'm really sad about it, having visited the Casa Bonita several times. They have a GoFundMe. They're trying to save the Casa Bonita. It's a horrible restaurant, but it's an experience you'll never get anywhere else. And it's worth going.
Ringing endorsement from our very own Chase Mitchell.
They literally, you know, like the cafeteria trays that are like plastic from elementary school. They serve you food on that they like scoop out of a trough. That's the quality of food you get at the Casa Bonita. Nice. But there is literally indoor cliff divers and a cave, and it's super cool. Except for it's barely a restaurant.
It's amazing.
So I think we covered this bit of Tucker Carlson a bit. I think we should cover the other bit of Tucker Carlson that I brought up, which is the critical race theory mumbo jumbo that he keeps banging out about. I'm sure everybody on this panel has their own thoughts and opinions about critical race theory, but let's keep it towards kind of the newsy aspect of that, and say what kind of like things that have been happening in the news, and then provide our own analysis on it. Is there anybody on the panel that can give a better description of critical race theory than myself and what's been going on with it?
I'll have more to say once we break into the subject, because I want to explain it from like a conservative perspective.
For sure. Art, what I think you actually a bit more well read on this than I am, to be honest.
I mean, at a real basic level, I mean, we could spend all day talking about it, but you're just talking about power dynamics. I mean, you're talking about the effect. Basically, you know, it's kind of the old joke that like being woke is just understanding the past and giving a shit about the effects in the present. I mean, it's really not any more complicated than that. I mean, you can get into inferences of that where you have basically like the academic version of critical race theory, which is power dynamics, you know, writ large. And then you have the modern interpretation, which is, you know, on like the neo-corporate leftist side, like basically your white guilt by what's her name, Rob D'Angelo. Or you have the conservative version, which is also white guilt. And also they want to they want to replace us with hordes from Latin America. So like there's this weird dynamic of like, you know, eternal guilt that everyone seems to get really triggered by. And then there's, if you take a step back, just more of a measured understanding of history, power, and, you know, the effects of the past and the present. I mean, again, that's a super shorthand version. We could be in this all day, but that's basically
that was a great recap of it. Honestly, it's grounded in critical theory, which is grounded in power Marxist analysis. So that should be mentioned. So that's chalk one up for Marxism.
Is power Marxist?
Okay, can
like
I?
A power bottom?
Oh God, no, seriously.
Let's go. Counterpoints. Let's go.
Yeah. So here's my thing. It's like, so one of the most frustrating fucking thing, or God damn it. So anyways, one of the most frustrating things.
It doesn't matter.
Yeah, I know. Just reflex, just the inner Marine coming out. So the problem, one of the problems that I have is basically like lefties or whatever being like, oh, well, this isn't Marxist analysis. Marxist analysis is purely about economics. And it's like, okay, that's true. But if you were to take like the power dynamics analysis of like Marxism, which is basically like, you know, the bourgeois is in control and the proletariat is oppressed. And what we need to do is we need to abolish these categories. And then once we abolish these categories, everybody will be happy. That, you know, that's like the more maybe Robin DiAngelo version of like CRT for me, where it's like, you know, race has been constructed and it's this evil hierarchy. And, you know, basically like we need to abolish these categories. That way we can all live in happiness and peace for forevermore. And so to deny that like link between like leftist thought, leftist analysis, all that kind of stuff, and kind of like CRT, that's weird as fuck to me. So that being said, just because it's weird that people are denying the association of like leftist philosophy with CRT doesn't mean that it's wrong. Okay, so that's like a distinction that I would like to make. So, for instance, looking at like, you know, history, systemic analysis, like all that kind of stuff, these are powerful sociological tools that we could use to like diagnose and prescribe solutions for problems in our society. And if we were incremental and intelligent about it, we would actually be able to make some progress. The problem is that I think the diagnosis portion of it, a lot of people like to mistake the systemic for the interpersonal. So because of these systems, all white people are guilty. Therefore, we can now be racist to white people. I see that on twitter.com more than anywhere else. And then also in the inverse, basically white people being like, oh, well, you know, we can't fix anything because we've given up interpersonal racism and systemic racism doesn't exist. So we can't do anything to improve the world. And it's this dumb battle where everybody's talking past each other.
I have nothing. I can't disagree with any of that. To be
there's
honest,
certainly there's a profoundly cringe element of the left that loves being anti-white.
True.
And, you know, sometimes ironically, but often not. And it's too bad because, you know, that's not the point. It was never supposed to be the point to make it that sort of thing. You certainly have to understand that people who have been oppressed and marginalized over time would have a lot of resentment. And, you know, that's just normal when people come out of these experiences and you can shift, you can sense power is shifting. There's always going to be people who will want to abuse it. That's how we got here in the first place. We had white people that want to abuse it. There will always be some element in any group that will want to abuse power. So, you know, I think that a good understanding of shifting power is not that it should be viewed as a mechanism for revenge. And I think that this is where a lot of bad faith interpretation comes in. People, and this is like a big Ben Shapiro talking point, is that if everyone is inherently racist forever, then we shouldn't bother trying to fix it because nothing can ever be fixed because it's an eternal problem. Now that's
wow. Was that something he said out loud?
Oh yeah.
I mean, that's a lot. That's a thing a lot of them believe, right? Like they believe that racism is an innate human characteristic. So
that is amazingly stupid. That is incredible.
Yeah. So, and there's just kind of throw this out here. There's a Thomas Sowell quote. Every new generation is born, in effect, as an invasion of civilization by little barbarians who must be civilized before it is too late. We understand that humanity is inherently flawed. This isn't specific to racism. Even if you take a very, Judeo-Christian viewpoint of it, we have our kind of original sin or some level of flaw where we need God to help us, get to a better state. So the idea that we're all inherently racist to some degree, that's no different than us being inherently sinners. Like that's just an aspect of human existence. We all have our different flaws, be it sexism or whatever. We have our monkey programming, which some ways serves us well and some ways does not. And we just have to learn how to tame it and train it to exist in society. That's it. Like, people that look at CRT as though, like, if we look at this, it's trying to deal with this unsolvable problem. And why try to solve something that's unsolvable? That misses the point. The fact that it's not technically solvable, well, so what? Being a human's not solvable. Like, we just do our best.
I mean, isn't that the whole point of Christianity as well? So.
Yes. No, there's a whole bunch of analogs, and I'm sorry for jumping in, but like basically, there's a whole bunch of analogs here to conservative thought, and basically, just because there's an ideal that you can never meet doesn't mean that you don't strive towards the ideal, and that's one of the very frustrating things for me. Because oftentimes I'll bump into conservatives who are like, "This is as good as it gets," and I'm like, "Really?" Like. Fucked up schools, broken families, basically people who think that they have to turn to crime as a vocation for their entire life. And it's an intergenerational cycle. People addicted to drugs, cops who basically throw people in cages and that doesn't improve their lot in life at all. Poverty, drug abuse, again, broken families. This is the best we can do. Or the solution is just be more Christian. It's literally, we can't do anything, or these people just need to return to their faith. And that's the conservative solution to these problems. And I'm not religious, but I do admire religion. As somebody who's not religious, I can't square that. I can't square that at all, that this is the best we can do. That's really frustrating to me.
Chase,
see, we'll make a good leftist out of you yet.
No, you won't. You won't, because power still resides with the institutions.
We'll convert you just like we converted Tom Fuller. Chase, go ahead.
Connor kind of took us on a journey, but I just wanted to acknowledge that I agree with this. I've gotten into several arguments because a lot of people love the phrase "everybody is racist," and that phrase drives me absolutely crazy. And it kind of ties into what Connor was talking about. And in general, this reinforces a feeling of inevitability and nothing you can do about it. And when leftists say that, I know that that's not what they intend, but it is kind of reinforcing that idea. And we all know that the left is terrible at branding anything. They've never come up with a slogan that isn't bad. I mean, that's just reality.
It's almost a skill how bad they are at rhetoric.
Oh, it's so bad. It's so obnoxiously bad. But seriously, I'm like, okay, there's a difference between acknowledging that everybody has an inherent racial bias that they can acknowledge and overcome versus saying everyone is racist. If you just say everyone is racist, you're diminishing that word. And I got into do you guys remember? You guys are old enough that you might remember the show Legends of the Hidden Temple. Do you know that show? Awesome show, right? Silver Snakes, Blue Barracudas, top like S tier Nickelodeon. I think it was on Nickelodeon. I'm pretty sure
it was,
right? And I literally got in an argument because somebody said that show is racist, and I said, okay, it's maybe slightly culturally appropriative because it borrowed some ideas from like Southern American indigenous cultures, but I don't think that culturally appropriative is racist. And I got called like an idiot for not acknowledging that it's racist. And I'm like, I don't think it's racist. I think words matter. And you need to be careful about how you use a word like racist.
Yeah, I mean, leftist Twitter is like this cliff, and once you fall off it, there ain't no coming back. Like the people who they're just waiting to find other leftists to cancel, and they're just like inquisitors, just trying to get you to confess. If you dime yourself out, then good luck. By saying something as incendiary as whatever you just said about cultural appropriation, which I'm not going to repeat.
Temple isn't racist.
I don't want to get clipped, but but what
it's
you
too
just
late.
said,
We're already canceled.
Maybe you white devils, but
no, but that's okay. But this is actually why I'm not a leftist. Okay, so when we're talking about, I just want to explain this really quickly, just like for people, literally Wikipedia.com. All right, it's your fucking friend. All right.
True.
So check out like left versus right. The whole origin of the term is the right wing was the monarchists. I have to keep pushing, or else I'm never going to get there. So the right wing was the monarchists. So they were the institutions in pre-revolutionary France, and the left wing was basically the secularists. They were the people who wanted like a secular government. They wanted to ban the monarchy. They wanted to fight religion a little bit, all that kind of stuff. So it's really a demonstration or a description of power. Like, where do you think power resides? In the institutions that we have created that are worthy of some level of defense, or within the people themselves who can revolutionize the system at any point. And that's really like the break between left and right is, are you for people or are you for institutions? The reason why I'm for institutions is because I think there are some very smart institutions that have been created inside America. I think they constrain some of our worst impulses. I think they set up some really good societal rules. And that's why I'm an institutionalist inside the United States of America. The reason why I'm not a leftist is because if like lefties found themselves like suddenly inside like a wet paper bag that was going to suffocate them to death, they would start accusing each other of like being like too fucking ableist. Like you trying to punch the hole in the paper bag is ableist. Don't punch the hole in the paper bag. I'll punch the hole in the bag because I'm disabled, and that's actually like more progressive. And then before you know it, they would literally be consumed and killed by a completely preventable situation because they were too busy fighting about who was the most right in the situation.
Quick point. What do you, as far as establishments and organizations and all that, what do you think about the woke CIA?
Oh, I love it.
Wait.
I love it. I think it's the best thing they've ever done because now progressives and lefties have to fight over whether or not like the CIA can be intersectional as it like overthrows democratically elected governments. And it's like, but they have a Hispanic lady who's overthrowing the Latin American government. It's progressive. And then the leftists are like, no, it's about the power dynamics. It's about, economics. It's about, power. It's about all this kind of stuff. And then they just fight forever. That was one of the smartest things the CIA has done in the past 100 years.
Oh, no, it's glorious. But so let's take that and kind of expand that to like Coca-Cola, Facebook, any of these big corporations that now have a leftist bent. So you basically have these institutions of power, organizations. What?
Leftist.
No.
Yeah,
you know what I mean? You talk about the meme where you've got the drone, and then you've got the Biden drone that's got like the gay flag on it. Like that meme,
and it's shooting like multicolored dildo missiles that like have like Black Lives Matter on the side of it. Yeah,
and when they blow up,
I sign up for this.
Yeah,
right. all I'm saying is that you have institutions of power that are adopting kind of leftist trappings, and at a certain point that changes dynamics. Like even if they're doing it as a fake front up front, they're institutions of power that will change the world, and they affect and influence the world. Even if they're doing it insincerely, it changes everything. You now have, for instance, like the baseball situation in Atlanta. Like you have these corporations that have huge amount of power to push back, and are you okay with that as far as basically having that kind of leftist power in institutions?
Personally, I'm horrified. I think it's a terrifying proposition that like we're gonna have like NYPD dog robots with like guns like mounted on them, but they're gonna have like BLM painted on the side. That's gonna be weird as shit. But at the same time, like this is also kind of what's being, I want to say it's almost like culturally demanded of us. Like I can't even find the beginning of this slippery slope that we're on because we've just been sliding down it for so long. I can't even like understand it. I'm a boomer in internet years. I'm in my early to mid 30s. So at this point, basically historically, the amount of things that have changed since I was a child are wild. So in the thousands, I think we were very similar on gay rights as we are with trans rights right now, where younger people are more in tune and accepting of trans rights. And also it's just kind of like culturally accepted on the lower level. But boomers and maybe like middle-aged people like myself are a little bit less accepting, and there's like a cultural pushback, but it seems inevitable that trans rights are going to be accepted as like the arc of history progresses. So I don't know. I don't think that, again, because I'm not religious, I don't want to drag my heels in the ground and be like, trans identity is not a thing. People aren't born gay. I'm trying to think of like another like religious conservative talking point. Black people just deserve what they will deserve what they get, like because of systemic racism doesn't exist. There's a whole bunch of conservative talking points that are incredibly dumb, and they're rooted in like the appeal to tradition. Because we've been doing things for a certain amount of time, we have to continue doing them this way in perpetuity.
So,
and if people weren't born gay, my life would have been so much easier.
Yeah. No, Dave Chappelle has a joke that he was canceled for, and I won't repeat it, but basically it was, I believe that trans people are real because it's so difficult. Who would knowingly go through that, knowing all of the personal, physical, emotional, societal consequences? And that like, while it was said like very aggressively and flamboyantly to the point that he got canceled for it, I think that that's actually like a powerful message. It's like, who would choose to face this much scorn?
I don't want to sidetrack us, but what do you mean by got canceled in the context of Dave Chappelle?
Okay, so I am not a person. I'm not a person who subscribes to this thing that like people actually have to leave society in order to be canceled. I think just like large public pressure from a large variety of people calling him a piece of shit publicly for like 6 months at a time to the point that his life is difficult to live publicly. I think that's sufficient for me to define it as cancellation.
Okay, that's fair.
So, yeah, like Contra or whatever. I would say she's been canceled multiple times, despite the fact that she's like a multi-hundred. Yeah, she's a multi-100,000-air person who can basically wake up whenever they want, take 90 days to produce a video, and their fans still love them. Okay, so
beautiful, by the way, too.
Yeah. So like, are they really canceled? No, maybe not. But at the same time, the pressure to cancel Contra is very much there.
Extreme social shaming would be cancel culture to you.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. We got a couple of comments. Oh, go ahead.
I was just gonna say I get that. That's all.
Yeah.
So we got a couple of comments from the audience. So we have again Death of Certainty saying purity test equals cringe. If you don't agree with me, a thing, you're an idiot. True. 100% agree with that. And then we also had a comment from Jared Marshall saying, at this point, I think most conservatives think that they've done their best and are just rejecting most prescribed fixes as poison pills. So I think that's kind of where a lot of conservatives are. And I just wanted to say that the whole wisdom of the ancients thing, there is some truth to it, but we really got to get away from it. Not everything, tradition for the sake of tradition is just as bad as change for the sake of change. And it's just one of those situations where,
This is a weird thing, but this is why I love the Hamilton musical so much, because these figures from history are so often revered and in history are taught in a way as to be like demigods almost. And the Hamilton musical presented them just as what they were, which was people. And I just think that's really important that we recognize. I used to think that elected officials were also like this elite group of people. And then I met a couple of them and then I knew, oh, these guys are dumb shits just like me. So,
yeah. Oh,
yeah, there's some bad ones. My hometown has he's a jerk. He's a peach.
You're bringing out some existential angst in me, because what I thought I was going to turn 18 and I was going to join this elite class of people called adults. And adults know what's going on. They know what's real. They know what's not real. They know what's true. They know systems. They know people. They're an elite class of individual that are worthy of your love and respect. And when I turned 18 and then I looked around and I'm like, oh, this is just older, stupid assholes. That was like a really rude awakening. And I still don't think I've completely gotten over it. Like, I'm still looking for like another adult in the room. Like, please, God, tell me what to do. Like, yeah, please tell me you have the answers. And they're like, no, I don't have the answers either. I'm like, oh, like somebody tell me.
High school never ends, right?
Yeah, it really doesn't. It's brutal.
We actually have one other comment from Death of Certainty I want to get in before we switch topics, which is that this is how the people in power co-opt any movement that might result in real change the branding, but nothing else, and pretend mission accomplished, which goes back to the point that we were making about the CIA and everything else like that. Just taking on the veneer of progressive wokeism in order to, get some of that shine.
Well, I'm just going to say this as a linguist. If the other side gets you to adopt their way of speaking and their kind of modes of thought, then you basically, even if you're doing it insincerely, you've accepted their framing and you've lost ground. So now I believe that they're probably doing it in a sense of, ultimately, if you want to take the Marxist view, that this is ultimately a class struggle, and the powers that be are willing to, move the goalposts back in terms of race, because they're trying to defend class. If they can get another 50 years out of us doing that, they'll just do that, and they'll just inch the goalpost back.
100%. It's a tactical retreat. 100%. And so I wanted to say this because they said something incredibly smart. Tradition for tradition's sake. So one of the things that what frustrates me though is that so I'm a Jordan Peterson stan. That's another reason why I'm on the right. So basically what he does, one of the most it's all right. I'm gonna double down or triple down.
We're screwed.
So it's okay. You'll be all right. So what he does that I think is really valuable is basically articulates the metaphors, the parables, the analogies, the moral lessons of the Bible in a context that actually makes sense in the modern era. So like the Tower of Babel, like don't worship the creations of humanity as those that rival the divine, because you will always be disappointed with the creations of humanity. I'm trying to think of another one, but like Adam and Eve, basically like the knowledge of good and evil, like humanity's moral awareness is what makes them even capable of understanding the concept of evil. That's an interesting concept. Basically, Jonah and the whale, like denying your own what you feel like you're called to do is going to result in more bad outcomes for you than just embracing who and what you are and what your mission in this world is. So there's a whole bunch of like moral lessons that are of course like trapped up in what a lot of people view as like toxic biblical parables and metaphors. But if you took it as a parable or as a metaphor and not as like a literal truth, there's actually an incredible amount of like moral value and like guideposting that you can use as an individual, even a secular individual. So the reason why I bring all of this up is because I don't believe in defending tradition for tradition's sake. I do believe in defending moral axioms that appear to be true and are useful for human beings to live happy and healthy lives. And oftentimes I think the left is in such a frenzy to destroy things that they don't want to replace it with anything. And that's one of my main beefs.
Well, and I think that to kind of build off of that, I think that there is value in tradition and, doing things that as you've done them in the past for the sake of tradition. But when it is dogmatic, that's where I think it becomes problematic. So you can do things that are you might have even like Christmas traditions, family traditions, rituals that you do because it makes you feel good to do them. Like I don't consider myself particularly religious, but certain holidays and the way that we celebrate them, or even going to like my hometown church, those are traditional things. But if it becomes a dogma that affects like my core belief system that I then apply to everything else only because it is rooted in that tradition, that's when it becomes problematic.
No, go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say there's a rhetorical distinction that I want to spread, which is basically traditionalism versus conservatism. One of the founders of conservatism, Edmund Burke, basically, advocated for Burkean conservatism, which means that you conserve what is worth conserving, things that continue to function, not things that basically you do continue for tradition's sake. So a lot of conservatives, quote unquote, are traditionalists. They want to hold on to concepts and structures and ideas that don't seem to be serving a positive societal purpose anymore. But they're rigidly holding on to them because they've been around for a long time, and that makes them important automatically. I think what I would invite a lot of conservatives to do is adopt the Burkean perspective, which is this serving me? Is this serving my society? Is this serving my, humanity? And if it is, then I fight for the preservation of that idea, not just all ideas because they're old.
So I used to describe myself as a gods of the copybook heading conservative back when I was more conservative. And if you're not familiar with it's an old Kipling poem, but just as an example, it's really a kind of a framing of the wisdom of the ancients being something that's been tested over time, and it's true whether you want it to be or not. So, and as an example, there's one line that I always liked, and it's as the Cambrian measures were forming, we were promised perpetual peace. They said if we laid down our weapons, that the wars of the tribes would cease. But when we disarmed, they sold us and delivered us bound to our foe. And the gods of the copybook heading said, "Stick to the devil you know."
Damn, I need to read more Kipling.
Weirdly, I mean, any complaints against, there's a lot of wisdom, whether or not you agree with the source. But the point being, and that's the idea of basically seeking peace when there's not really the conditions for it. But the point being is that there's a lot of things that traditionalists do because we learned the hard way over the course of millennia. And even if conservatives don't know why it's a good idea and they continue to ape it, it's built off of hard lessons of the past. So it's important to be able to dissect from a modern standpoint, and that's why I think there's probably some value to what Peterson does in trying to interpret the Bible in a useful way to now. Some of those lessons don't really translate very well, and a lot of them do. You just have to understand in context which ones are worth preserving and which ones probably didn't, pass the test of time. And there's a value in looking at the wisdom that is hard fought and maybe doesn't agree with the way that, folks on the left would like it to be. Like ideally, we wish things would be better, but things have been tried in the past. It didn't work. And there's probably a lot of value in understanding why some traditionalists have certain traditions that seem to work over a long span of time. And if you're going to change something like that, it has to be with great understanding of how that foundation came to be and why it was so successfsul.
Yeah, and that so you nailed a lot of nails right there. So one, Kipling's based. One of my favorite poems, I even forget the title, but it's basically like "How to Be a Man" or "You'll Be a Man, My Son." If that poem just hits me right in the gut, especially as a son and as a father. So that one punches me in the gut. So I would definitely recommend everybody Google that right now. And then the other one was The Law of the Jungle. That is just like an incredible piece of art that just like I probably need to frame it and put it somewhere. So the point being that I think you're right. A lot of people don't understand their traditions, and on top of that, a lot of traditions function. One of the main things that I advocate for in my political debates, like Twitch politics and all that kind of stuff, is basically like you have to understand the systems you want to destroy, because if they're preventing a problem in history that we already know exists once you destroy the structure, then that problem is going to come back unless you have some kind of preventive measure for it. So oftentimes when I speak with like vanguard leftists or like revolutionaries or whatever, I'm like, okay, you want like a single party state, you want to have a revolution, it potentially could be violent, all that kind of stuff. What is going to be the social infrastructure that's going to prevent people from seizing power and having like a dictator of the proletariat, as we've seen in like all these other socialist states? And oftentimes they'll just say like, oh, well, we'll just be democratic. And it's like, okay, well, if you have a bunch of like vanguard militants who seize power of the government, why would they want to be democratic? Why would they cede power to people they don't like or respect, who they view as counter-revolutionary? And oftentimes they don't have an answer for that. And that's my thing. It's like, I don't have a problem with change. I don't have a problem with making black people's lives in America on average better, trans people's lives, gay people's lives on average better. What I do have a problem with is blowing up institutional and social functions that seem to be holding back worse consequences. And what's coming to mind for me is limited government, basically government that actually follows its own laws, and firearms as like two of my near religious convictions as cornerstones for a functioning free society.
Well, with that, I think we do need to go on to the next topic, which is our segment News of the Weird. On this week's News of the Weird, we are going to talk about this story, which is, let me get over here. Intruders trespass at an Indiana Denny's in dead of night, cooked eggs twice. So rather than actually go in and rob the place, they decided to make some eggs. So let me go ahead and move this over to my main screen so I can read it really quick. So the intruders entered the closed establishment at 2 a.m. Wednesday before moving straight to the kitchen to prepare themselves some eggs, according to the Evansville Police Department crime report. The suspects then left the restaurant before returning just before 3 a.m., at which point they made more eggs. During their second helping, however, a Denny's worker arrived and confronted the two men, who soon left the restaurant. The worker later provided surveillance video of the alleged theft to the police. As of the responding officer noted in the crime report, the trespassers did not force entry into the building as the door to the restaurant seemed to be opened at both times. Sergeant Nick Winston of Evansville Police Department said that the two men had not yet been identified or apprehended as of Friday morning. If caught, the suspects face charges of theft and criminal trespassing. So the reason that I like doing these little news of the weird segments is because I think they're fun, first and foremost. And two, I like to use them as kind of like a social kind of lens to view things as. So do we think this was just a couple of drunk guys that really needed some eggs? Or do you think this is more tied to maybe poverty or crime opportunity? What do you guys think?
Drunk.
Dude, it has to be. They have to be crunk as shit. Because listen, if you're poor,
and then you come back.
You know better than to do something like this because you're going to get fucked up. These are some people who had no fear of the consequences, which means they had to be totally. Because like you have to make so many decisions to get to this point. You have to go into the Denny's, realize there's nobody there, go into the kitchen, get out the eggs, figure out how to turn on the stoves, cook the eggs. You're talking. This is a major commitment. I mean, I am extremely impressed with these people. I wish I had balls that big.
This sounds like meth focused to me. Like you get
potentially,
folks who are really tweaked out. And
Go ahead. I was gonna go ahead.
But you see some guys like out working in his car at 2 a.m, just like laser focused in. And it's like yeah.
Thanks, bud.
Yeah, I was just gonna say it was in Evansville, so meth is not far off from the possible consequences.
Where is Evansville? I'm sorry.
It is in Indiana. My geography is terrible, but I think it is about 2 hours or an
actually
hour
Evansville,
and a half
if I remember correctly.
Minneapolis.
If that's near. Oh, is it? Dang, I'm thinking of like Gary. I thought Evansville. Oh no, Evansville might be really nice. Never mind. Yeah,
Evansville was a major manufacturing hub at one point. It is on the Ohio River in Indiana. So it's got like Evansville, Muncie. There's a couple other places around Indiana, kind of more north and rural, that do have drug problems, but mainly meth. So.
I mean, it's in Indiana, so it's kind of automatically bad.
Fuck you. I'm from Indiana, man. You shut up. No, I'm just kidding.
I mean, I'm sorry that you're from a terrible state.
Oh God. Shots fired. No,
you're close to. I mean, I don't know how close, but Tiberius lives in Indiana, I think. So
does he?
Yeah.
Oh, I'm actually in Texas right now.
So I was going to say, so does Mike.
Indiana.
So does Mike Pence.
Goddamn Mike Pence. Yeah, Shelton said is right across the river from Kentucky, so it's over there. So southeast rather than north. But yeah.
Yeah. So, but what I would say is, fellas, if they don't have enough information, if you're watching this podcast, okay, if they don't have enough information to catch you at this point, they don't have enough information to catch you. So don't turn yourself in. And if you get caught, they're just misdemeanors. So plea that shit out. You'll be fine.
But if they do find you and catch you, the number one rule, anytime the police want to ask you any question, is shut the fuck up.
Yeah. I would like to speak to my lawyer. There you go.
And as soon as you say that, they can't continue to question you, no matter how hard they try. So yep. I think. Is there any final thoughts about this breaking B&E with? Actually, it wasn't even a B&E. Criminal trespass with some eggs, or should we move on?
Just misdemeanors.
I kind of want to know what's going on with the Denny's, that the doors are just unlocked and nobody's like, aren't most Denny's like 24 hours?
I thought they were 24 hours. So that was even weirder. Yeah.
I mean, in my hometown, we had Perkins, which Perkins is like the king of that kind of restaurant.
Yeah, it's a lot less trashy than Denny's, that's for sure.
Get muffins the size of your head for $1.
Yes.
It's like nobody wants to work for $4 minimum wage anymore. Like it's just the work ethic is gone.
Weird. Yeah, holy shit, man. So the right just triggers the shit out of me because basically, so because people are unwilling to work for slave wages, they're bad people.
Yeah, that sounds right.
Americans should just expect to work for 40 years, 40 to 60 hours a week, probably 60 hours a week in order to make ends meet. No retirement, no health benefits, and literally just go into your 60s. Yeah, which will be cut by like 30% by the time by the time millennials are of retirement age. So, like, unless they change the funding, it'll be cut by 30%. So that's just what Americans should expect. Work for 50 years and then drop dead.
Don't worry, it's the American way.
President Yang will get us back with that $1,000 a month. So just give it time.
All right. As long as he doesn't tank the economy, I don't care.
I didn't bring him up before, but he's a big part of the reason why I am worried about the automated future and our need to prepare for it.
Oh, if they... Sorry, go ahead.
No, I'll just say it after.
Oh, I was just going to say, like, I think the right needs to have different solutions besides bootstrapping. I think they do. And if they care about families, then they need to care about the health and well-being of those families. And if they care about the vocational opportunities for the children of those families, then Americans need a decent education. And if they care about the health of those families, then they need decent health care. I know this is fucking wild, like just like wild, like mind-blowing concepts.
Radical liberal counterpoints.
But if you want, I'm serious, because I'll be like a vampire bourgeois capitalist now. If you want healthy workers that you can suck their financial well-being out of their souls, then you need to give them, like, a good vampire doesn't kill his victim in one fell swoop, right? A good vampire just like sucks enough blood to keep his victim alive forever. So, there you go.
True.
I think based on my reading of the Twilight movies, then that makes them become a vampire.
Ah, damn it. That's why they don't do it.
But speaking of Andrew Yang, for those that may not know, we do have a podcast on all the podcast streaming services out there. And we have a relevant episode to that called episode 4, 1000 Smackaroos. It goes over Andrew Yang and UBI, kind of the fourth industrial revolution and all the things that might be coming down the pipeline. It's about an hour long. Check it out. It's one of our early episodes and one of our best. So go ahead and hit that up. Art, what are you going to say?
Oh. Nothing. I'm glad my boy's doing well in New York. So
true, he is.
Give him a couple years running the city, and hopefully we'll see him back in 2028. So,
President Yang, first Yang, not Yang.
Oh, I'll stand for
first Asian Yang president. Go for it.
I expected, because he was such a one-issue guy early on in the primary, that I thought he was a terrible candidate, and he turned out to be such a well-rounded, likable candidate. I was just shocked by how well he turned out to be. He seems like such a great dude.
Yeah, and he's young, that's why I said, like, 2028, 2032, it sounds like a long ways away now, but think about like 2010, like that. We felt like we just left.
Wait, so, Obama's not president?
Right.
Bin Laden's dead?
You know what I'm saying? Like, we're going to be at 2030 before we know it. So
yeah, no, I am. And that here's some boomer advice to the kiddos. You're going to blink and you're going to be as old and decrepit as me. That's what's going to happen. So don't blink.
You're going to wake up one day at 30 and you're going to stand up and all your knees are going to pop. All of them, because you're going to have like 6 of them and you didn't even know about it. And then you're going to be like, what the fuck happened? And I'm like, age, man. Age.
You're 30 now.
Connor, you're not decrepit at all. You got the haircut. You got a whole new vibe going on. I'm telling you.
Listen, like the outside, it's like a 1910 like building or whatever, where like the outside of it looks really good, but if you like walk in and you kick a corner post, it's all gonna fall apart.
Inside the triangle shirt coat factory is actively burning.
It's brutal, but I do my best.
I get it. I have like permanent upper back pain. Basically, it's awful. I've tried everything.
Life is a bitch. That's why you guys need to read Peterson, or listen to his old stuff before he actually went insane.
So that I'm even more miserable all the time.
Yeah, then you can all evolve to suffer, but suffer in style. That's what it is.
All right. So for the last topic that I kind of want to talk about, since we have been going on for about an hour and a half now, is the results of the census and what that could mean for politics going forward for the next 10 years. Some big states have lost some seats. California, New York. Was it Nevada? No, I don't think Nevada.
Michigan, I think, lost one.
Yeah.
Gained one.
I
should.
States that lost.
I'll be right back. I'm going to grab some water.
Oh, no worries. So I got pulled up on 538. Like, there you go. So we have Texas gaining 2, we have Florida gaining 1, we have North Carolina gaining 1, Colorado gaining 1, Oregon gaining 1, and Montana looks like it's gaining 1 as well. Whereas California has lost 1 seat, New York has lost 1 seat, Illinois has lost 1 seat, so has Pennsylvania, Ohio, Michigan, and West Virginia. So these are the states that have lost seats, mostly Democratic, and most of the states that have gained seats are mostly Republican. Actually, they're all Republican, so never mind. So what? Oh,
you said Colorado gained a seat, right?
Yeah. So never mind. So one liberal seat, one liberal-ish state. So yeah, What does how does that bode for politics going forward? We know that the New York is suing to see if they can find those 89 people that cost them the seat. They lost their seat by only 89 people. There's been tons of issues with the census due to Trump's terrible rollout of it. And all the things, the fuckery that went with that. Also being able to not COVID, counting people and COVID. Yeah, I was going to say and COVID. But, there was let's put this question on there. Let's take it off. Let's get it rolled out late. You can't mail it in. Then you can mail it in and blah, 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 blah. Yeah. So there's just been a huge issue with just getting people counted for both poor planning and management, as well as COVID. So thoughts?
I don't know. How long have you lived in Texas?
I have been here for, I have been in Texas for, I'll say 4 years. I arrived in 2015, so 6 almost, 2015, but I spent 1 year in Afghanistan. So
what brought you to Texas?
Work, the military. I was deployed in Afghanistan for a year. So, I mean, that's what it's going. Go ahead.
Yeah. I moved, I lived in Wisconsin. I moved to DC and that's where I'm at. And I did it because of work. And we've seen people going all over. People don't move willy-nilly. Moving is very expensive. Moving is hard. People don't do it unless they kind of have to. Why are people, there's this right narrative that people are fleeing California because of tax policy or something. I don't think that that's reality. I think that there's just relative changes. The job market is shifting. People are increasingly going to cities, and they're going where they need to be able to survive and thrive. And painting a picture of it being a left-right thing, I don't think is entirely true. There are some definite problems with the census. There's kind of a widespread agreement that Latino communities, even in Republican states where it would have potentially helped Republicans, were likely undercounted. And that's a serious problem. And, I wish that we could go back and do it again, but here we are. It is what it is.
Art, did you want to break in with a point?
I was just thinking California, just how the last month went. There were more home sales in Orange County in March than there were the last 2 Marches combined. The market's completely out of control. The prices have jumped. Earlier on, I was saying it was an average of 16% in California. Mm-hmm. We were actually, we have some couples who were trying to buy some, new stuff out here. We basically have big Wall Street money coming in, dropping cash, just scooping stuff up. The average house in the parts of Irvine or Orange County we're working right now are selling for about $40,000 to $50,000 over asking. So if you have $1 million house, the average that it's going to close at is $1,050,000, and that's the average. Sometimes you're close to $1.1 million. There's really no controls anymore. As far as the market, just the amount of money that's just coming in, and even normal people trying to buy a house are just competing against these huge entities. And it's just it's making it unlivable for even people that have good jobs out here. So I have family that have moved to nearby states to telecommute, so they have California money, but they're paying Utah or Idaho prices for their property. There's a lot of different things that I think are feeding into it. But I think the real basic easy narrative is that, the left wing People's Republic of California is chasing away, good workers and all that. But it's a lot more complicated than that. And I think that you are going to have a lot of people who are going to take a lot of attitudes outside of California. And even if these other red states gain seats, they might not be all that red. You might see increasing shifts in voting patterns because California is becoming unlivable due to, or maybe not unlivable, I can't say that, but it's inhospitable for increasing numbers of people.
Thanks for bringing your politics over here, you bastards.
not necessarily ours, but yeah.
If I had known that I was going to be working from home for as long as I have, I would have literally moved back to Wisconsin, and I would have saved about $15,000 over the course of COVID just in housing costs.
Sure.
Yep. 100%. And I'm really excited for the opportunities that telework is going to bring. I know this is more about the census and political shifts and all that kind of stuff. But I'm really excited for the opportunities that telework brings, because basically, like, there's nothing stopping me. I'm working a telework job. I found an administrative job that unfortunately I really dislike, but it pays really well. And
that's the worst, isn't it?
Oh my God. Like, you're like, oh man, I'm going to quit. And then they're like, oh, how much of a pay hit would I take? All right, I'm going to stay and I'm going to be happy. So basically, but the reason why I like telework, or I hope that it's part of the future, is if you can find one of these bureaucratic jobs that pays a living wage. I know they're hard to find, but they exist. Then there's really nothing stopping you from doing anything. Visiting your parents, working at your parents' place so you can have a prolonged week with your family, basically staying at home if you actually have a family, seeing your kid in the middle of the day. I can't tell you how cool it is. I have a 3-year-old. I can't tell you how cool it is to literally go to lunch and I have a half hour to 45 minutes and I can hug my son on the way in and on the way out. That's awesome. And then also because there's potential increases in my salary in the future, despite me hating my job, I could rent out my house in Florida and maybe go spend a summer someplace else, maybe go to California and rent for 2 months, just enjoy the scenery, go to the San Diego Zoo and, all that kind of stuff, go to whatever that burger joint is that has like a 2-hour line. I could go there. And then when it's too expensive and I'm bored of it, I could say, see ya fuckers, I'm out. And then just go someplace cheaper. So I'm excited for telework. As far as the shifts, if Democrats dropped guns, they would win. If Republicans took interest in developing American families and enabling people to succeed in appealing to the social conservatism of immigrants, Republicans would sweep. But it seems like both political factions are absolutely obsessed with losing. So I don't know what to do about that.
God, that is so true. It's infuriating. Why the hell isn't weed legal yet? Why isn't weed legal?
It's failure theater.
I don't know what that has to do with the census, Connor, but it's true, and I'm upset and I'm angry.
Yeah.
To the census point with the whole California exodus or whatever you have it, Austin is also experiencing an economic boom, a housing boom with prices. People are coming from California with massive wads of cash and dropping cash on asking prices and offering $100,000 above asking price. So there's this ridiculous
those are my
dynamics. Say again?
I said those are my people. Yes.
Yeah. So just
stop infecting us with your Californianness.
Oh, it's just beginning.
We do Connor, not. We don't have enough snowboarding. No. I'm in Florida. It's worse. We have all the New Yorkers. I know it's brutal. But no, it is an interesting culture shift because it is turning a lot of these places purple. A lot of places that used to be solidly red are now competitive. There's also a lot of dinos and rhinos, Republicans who pander to social progressivism, and Democrats who don't care about guns. And I honestly, I hope that's the future, because I think we need a little bit of bipartisanship in order to move the country forward. And we can't rely on purely blue policy or purely red policy in order to get anything done. So I'm hoping that these purple states, Ohio, Florida, Texas is becoming more purple. I hope they actually provide us some of the political figures and solutions we need as a country. So
true.
Despite Californians being douches.
To the political point, does anybody on the panel think it would be as much of an issue if gerrymandering wasn't an issue? Do you think people would be actually up in arms about the census numbers not coming out to what they thought they would? For example, New York, or do you think that there would still be some of that, but it would be a lot less tamped down, maybe more tamped down, and what have you?
Republicans need to start winning on policy, not on fixed elections. Like that's where one of the things that I used to say is like, I like Republicans more because they're predictably evil. Democrats like to pretend they're your friend and then they just turn out to be evil later on. At least Republicans, you can expect them to be assholes up front. But part of the problem with that is like the country club class is getting, I don't want to say they're less relevant. They might be more relevant than ever, but it seems like there's an increasing dissatisfaction in vast swaths of the population that are saying whatever we're doing right now is not working. So that's where Republicans, they have a real choice in front of them. do you continue to defend the indefensible in the hopes of securing money, or do you actually come up with policy that helps out Americans? And until they do that, they're going to have to keep playing these fucked up games where they rigging elections. I know is strong, but gerrymandering obviously is some kind of voter manipulation.
If you look at the data, Republicans basically have an edge in every single federal category. So they have like a 5.5% edge on the presidency because of the Electoral College. They have about a 5% edge in the Senate, and I want to say it's a 2 or 3% edge on the House. So Democrats have to overcome that in terms of popular vote in order to get a majority. And that's due to a number of things, but gerrymandering is a huge one. And gerrymander is something that pisses me off because I see a lot of people on the right basically say, well, hey, we're in power, we should be able to do it. Turnabout's fair play. And I'm like, what you are advocating is unaccountable representatives who cannot get voted out of office. They are not accountable to their voters anymore. And is that what you want? You no longer have a 2-party elected official then. You have a single party elected official effectively, which is horrible. And I can't believe that people continue to defend this and say that we don't need nonpartisan districting. It's just, I don't understand. It's so bad.
Yep.
Well, these are losing strategies. Like, this is the kind of thing you do when you don't have a good long-term play, but you have a decent medium-term play. And with that, the Republicans, just due to some built-in advantages to the system that were engineered hundreds of years ago, they're able to put up a decent kind of firewall against any kind of progress. And because of that, they've kind of devolved into this like Dr. Seuss, Mr. Potato Head, like outrage machine. That's just like, that doesn't need to create policy because the voters don't expect policy. They don't really want it. They want to own the libs. And that's really what the product is. And as long as you can provide that, you're pretty safe in your seat. And
it's pretty fun. I'm not going to lie. Like, as counterproductive as it is, owning the libs is a lot of fun.
Yeah, I mean, and it probably for the short to medium term is gonna work pretty well. I mean, at some point when it stops working, it'll never work again. Like, this is the kind of thing where you're basically straining as far as you can reach to gerrymander, to basically have a party with no point. That at some point, like with COVID, when reality comes in, people ultimately do want government to fix things. Like, we have it for a reason. And COVID's not the last problem to hit. I mean, we're going to have, for instance, self-driving trucks in 5 years that could wipe out, or taxis that could wipe out, 20 million jobs. So we're going to have huge problems that are coming down the pike that we can't just like own the libs out of. They are going to want solutions, and the GOP is not currently engineered for solutions. It's more of just like a middle finger in the air towards the half of the other country.
Do you know? So here's my thing: is like, I feel like the GOP could win almost overnight. If they change two pieces of strategy. One, mild economic redistributivism in order to create happy and healthy families in America. 2, appealing to the social conservatism of immigrants, particularly Hispanics. So basically, like, that's a winning strategy. Apparently there's some conversations in the GOP about that. But for me, it's like, I see the Trump isolationism. I see a lot of these things as like losing policies that might be popular with 40%, 30% of the American public, and it's a very vocal and passionate 30 or 40%. But I think they're long-term losers.
Exactly. But in the short term, it'll probably be at least a good way to tread water and hold what you got, but it's not going to work for long.
Yeah. No, I would say by 2050, we're looking at a completely different landscape, although this is what's coming, and I hope you guys are ready for this. Trans GOP Congress people. That's by 2050, that's going to be a thing. By 2050, there's going to be gay, Hispanic, name any, minority advocacy group. There's going to be GOP representation from that group.
Senator Blair White.
Yeah. Yeah. How can I be how can I be a transphobe? I'm trans. Like, that's it's coming, bro.
Oh, but believe me, this will surprise no one. But I know, I hear what you're saying. Yeah,
it's coming.
Yeah.
To that point, we do have a comment from Barr saying, yes, Catholic Latinos should be easy for family-centric, socially conservative Republicans to attract, which is true. except the racism. But
whoa!
No, you weren't. What were you going for?
Where were you going for?
No, that's where I was going with that. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Well, you threw me off. I'm like, wait, what? And to Connor's point about the family helping families, I think that's what you're kind of seeing now with Mitt Romney and Josh Hawley. Is it Hawley?
Yes.
Hawley,
yeah. With their family plans. Although, honestly, if I had to choose between the two of them, it would be Mitt Romney because he doesn't have a fucking income threshold, whereas Hawley does. So there's still issues with the whole welfare queens, and you can't have babies to live on bullshit that's running rampant.
If Trump had pushed for Medicare for all, he'd be like a 4-term president. You know what I'm saying? like if he legalized weed and gotten like Medicare for all, because he could have done it. And there are like we kind of joke about it, but like there are things that either party could do if they could just get over their bullshit and just like decide to win elections. They could just say, you know what, we're gonna stop. We're just gonna stop the bullshit. We're just gonna do what the people want, and they would just they'd be unstoppable. But each party has these like hang-ups of like they just can't help themselves.
Yeah. I think, unfortunately, this all comes down to, I joke about it, and I am joking, Facebook. Okay. Joke. This is a joke. Boomer side. And what I mean by that is basically there has to be a generational shift. So a lot of these people are running on fumes. If you look at Nancy Pelosi, if you look at Mitch McConnell, if you look at Chuck Schumer, I don't care how many like babies they sacrifice to Moloch and then like suck the adrenochrome out of. You can't live past a certain age and have like a viable brain. Dianne Feinstein was just pulled from her panels because she actually has dementia, which has apparently been covered up for a few years. And so a lot of boomers that are politically relevant now are just not going to be in 10 or 20 years because they'll either be like have no brains left or they'll be dead. At that point, Gen X is a very small generation, and it's actually going to be politically down to millennials. And by the way, I don't think any of us are ready for that. I don't think any of us are ready for that. I think
at least we know how to fucking print a PDF. That's all I'm saying.
That's true. I'm happy we know how to do that. But I don't think millennials understand power or how to wield it. And I'm actually very worried that we've had the political training wheels on for a really long time. So I'm worried the worst parts of millennials are going to rule.
But Connor, if millennials and Zoomers didn't understand power, how do you explain cancel culture?
Oh, that's
this horrifies me worse because like mob. Yes, that's what millennials think power is. Mob justice of canceling people on Twitter. That's what power is.
Based. Anyways.
No.
You see, this is the problem, is that power has been wielded by the mob so many times to such negative ends, and there's no differentiation between holding somebody in power to account and holding somebody who's not in power to account and ruining their life because you found their address and they said something that you perceived as racist on Twitter. Like, it's
Go for it, Art.
Cancel culture plus infrastructure equals gulag.
Damn.
Wait for it.
Yeah. And for legal purposes, this is a joke.
right. In Minecraft.
Or in
old people all die eventually, usually of natural causes.
Usually, yeah. But this is my point, because I try to be as good faith of an interlocutor. Oh, Jesus! Somebody else say the word.
Interlocutor.
Somebody who talks. So I try to be as good faith as I can. I also try to spread good ideas as far as I can. And the reason why I do that isn't because of what I'm trying to accomplish right now. It's because of what I'm trying to accomplish in 30 years. I think we need to use the powers, the tools that we have right now, Discord being one of them, StreamYard, Twitch, YouTube, all that kind of stuff. We are going to see the rise and fall of YouTube and Twitch politicians. We really are. So there will be people who have basically social media empires who become politicians. So we need to be ready for that, and we also need to be ready to wield power more responsibly than we do right now. And it doesn't look like we are.
I'm ready for the first Twitch star to go into the mainstream. Tyler Bluntman, 2032.
Yeah, Instead of the Lincoln Douglas debates, we'll have the Vosh Destiny debates.
Yes.
President
hate
Jake
that
Paul.
you said it out loud because it's so true. I'm not kidding. I'm not kidding. Oh my God. I literally saw, it's actually really unfortunate because it's so, I'm going to share a little thing. Part of the reason why I'm not worried about getting canceled is because nobody's going to give a shit about YouTubers and Twitch people 100 years from now. Okay. Nobody's going to care. So make hay while the sun shines. And there was a guy who, like, in the 30s or 40s, he was like a big debate bro. He was basically the Destiny of the 1930s and 1940s. And he was literally like debating fascists. These were like national level events where like tens of thousands of people would show up just to hear like a prominent fascist philosopher debate this guy. And this guy would epically fucking own them. And nobody knows his name, including me, because I didn't remember it after I Googled it. And that just made me realize it's like, it's the ideas and the power and the institutions that matter. It's the lives of people every single day that matter. Our individual legacies do not matter as much, but we do have to focus on how these systems are constructed, how they interact with people on a day-to-day basis, how to improve them, and how to make sure America is actually a functioning civilization 50 years to 100 years from now.
Just a quick book recommendation, because you talk a lot about institutions and tradition and all that. So Kropotkin has this concept called the national inheritance in The Conquest of Bread. I think you might enjoy it. Okay.
I'm worried.
You should be worried, but no, it's basically the concept of institutional power. But you think about the effect of, of centuries of citizens that, tame a wilderness, and they build cities and they build roads. And they have, creation from nothing that isn't just what they did themselves, but what the people before them did that they've then capitalized on and built more and more on. So it's kind of a tradition in progress.
Yeah. So here's another thing. I know I'm talking a lot, but another reason why I'm not a lefty or whatever is if you boil down like the liberal democratic problem, it's hyper liberalism, hyper individualism. If you boil down leftism, oftentimes it's collectivism. It's basically the collective over the individual. The philosophy, unfortunately, it's a fascist philosophy, but it's something that I ascribe to. It's called communitarianism. And it's basically the belief of the intersection between the individual and the community, and how they interplay back and forth into each other, and the health of the community being evaluated on its term, and the health of the individual being evaluated on its term. And so that's where it's actually like it's a solution that is a perpetual problem. You have to constantly evaluate the collective, constantly evaluate the individual. And when there's tweaks that you can make to improve both of them, you have to do those tweaks. You can't emphasize one over the other because they're both important.
So I'm really not familiar with this philosophy, but I want to describe to you something that I think is an interesting application of this, and you can tell me if it's applicable or not. So the country of Bhutan, which is, in East-ish Asia, is an interesting place, a less developed country, and all of the metrics for international development are based on GDP and economic growth and providing these infrastructure standards. And Bhutan rejected that and said, we don't want to develop in the same way as everybody else. In fact, we want to maintain some of our traditional ways of life, and that makes us good. So we're instead going to measure gross national happiness, and that is going to be our measurement of success. So I found that whole concept very interesting, and I'm curious if you think that is like an application of this philosophy.
It actually is. So this closely aligns, and again, sorry for giving fascist ideas voice. But
I wouldn't call this fascist idea. I would say the fascism probably. I know I'm saying fascism subverted it in a way.
100%. So basically, it's the concept of political corporatism, believing in political entities as a body, and evaluating the health of the body as the ultimate goal of the government. So the overall health of the society, and then the individual health of the participants within that society, that is your evaluative goal. So unfortunately, it's this really good idea that's kind of wrapped up in at least 50% of a nefarious ideology, because they basically say the way you achieve this is through flexible authoritarianism. You appoint a really strong guy who just knows the right thing to do, and then he picks the right thing to do, and then he's right. And then if he makes the wrong choices, then another stronger, smarter guy will come up and make the right choices and kick that guy out of power. So that's like fascism 101. But the thing that should be like salvaged from that philosophy is the communitarian emphasis, basically resolving the conflict between the collective and the individual, because hyper-individualism has problems and hyper-collectivism have problems. And then also, what is the point of a kick-ass GDP if all of your people are working slave wages and they're unhappy and they're miserable and they want to kill themselves? What is the point of, dazzling technology if a fraction of the portion of the population has access to it? And it just kind of goes out from there of like, what is the point of all of our achievements if most people are miserable?
Ask Jeff Bezos. Everyone can make a point from a certain point of view. So, and just to kind of loop back to what you were saying about the community-based focus, Andrew Yang, when he was running, had an idea to replace GDP as a measure of well-being with something he called the American Scorecard, which was basically a way to measure everything from like mental health, underemployment, income inequality, consumer student debt, access to education, marriage and divorce rates, substance abuse, optimism, like basically look at all these factors that lead people to have good or bad lives and try to calculate that rather than calculate some GDP that's really only ultimately benefiting a handful of wealthy people.
100%. And this is where I think even the right wing. So unfortunately, again, nefarious ideas coded in good ideas. So this is where the Graper, the Christian nationalist right or whatever, they often talk about communitarianism. They often talk about sociology and happiness. Of course, the solution to making society more happy is to put gays back in the closet, trans people back in the closet, black people into a second-class citizen status, and Hispanic people south of the border. That's what's going to make everybody happy. But they create this laudable goal of communitarian happiness. And I think a lot of people are resounding with that right now because the economic structures that we have aren't working for the average person. It's pretty clear that there's a whole bunch of problems that we haven't addressed for decades. And it's also clear that there is a massive divorce between GDP and the stock market in the life of average Americans. One of the things that we kept hearing during COVID, while people were completely unemployed or underemployed for months upon months on end with very little governmental assistance, or a decent amount of governmental assistance that was very slow to respond, what we kept hearing was that the stock market was doing well. Stock market was doing great. So it's like,
Connor,
how the
only go up.
fuck is that possible?
Connor, two things. You said you were worried about getting clipped out of context earlier, and boy, you have a doozy right in the middle of that statement.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm good with it. I'm so good with it. As a matter of fact, I will consider myself had to made it when I have a Counterpoints out of context channel that I didn't create.
Don't we all love that? Yeah.
Yeah. When somebody makes that channel, I will have made it.
I mean, everyone will be happy when the gays are back in the closet is quite a quote.
Now you have it clipped too.
That you said, yeah. Everybody go ahead.
As a matter of fact, I would be honored if somebody from the CSP audience became my Counterpoints out of context clip champion. I would appreciate it. So think about it. It doesn't
like seriously. I am so on board. Anything, literally anything that will get politicians to stop bragging about the Dow Jones Industrial Average, which isn't even a good fucking stock market index.
It isn't.
Right.
It would make me so happy.
Yeah. It's brutal out there. But guys, I am old and decrepit, so
I was just about to call it a night anyway. So Connor, go ahead and shout yourself out and we'll call it a night.
Yeah, so my name is Connor. I run a YouTube channel named Counterpoints. I am a Marine veteran of 4 years. I am a police veteran of 4 years. I like to talk about violence. I like to talk about politics. I like to talk about power. That's pretty much me. I identify as center right. And what I would say is if any of you of the fine CSP audience want to become my clip chimp and clip me out of context and create like 3 to 5 minute videos where it seems like I'm the worst human being imaginable, I won't pay you, but I would consider it an honor. So thank you.
So you heard it here, guys. Everybody go ahead and clip everything from Counterpoints and put it up on Twitter so he can get canceled faster than a jackrabbit pulling pull.
But it has to be in a 5-minute segment that seems so ridiculous to be impossible. If it's just me saying one bad thing, I'm not going to enjoy that. So yeah,
for sure. So everybody go ahead and check out Counterpoints. Sorry. I dropped his link inside our various chats. Go ahead and hit him up on YouTube. great content. He's a good debater, good guy. So go ahead and check him out. So, but with that, I am sad to say that we are out of time. We know you liked what you heard because you stayed with it to the end. So go ahead and smash that like button for the algorithms. It really does help us out. It gets propagated throughout the entire internet, and it's good stuff. If you do Facebook, we do run a fairly good Facebook community, actually the best Facebook community on Facebook. It's called Tribune Commons. It's part of the crowdsourced Tribune package, where we're trying to run a not-for-profit that's designed to bring you content like this, as well as make the discourse in American politics better. If you don't do Facebook, go ahead and join our Discord community. You can find it in the links below. And with that, as always, keep your head up through the political storm.